So I suppose we could get started and then just while everybody's joining in, it'll just be a moment. So welcome everyone tonight. We are going to talk about soil as the solution, healing the earth one garden at a time or 1 yard at a time. My name is Yvonne Rasmussen. I'm the coordinator for the UC Master Gardener program here in Napa County, and we are glad to have you with us tonight. And I'd like to introduce our host, which is the Napa County Library, and Stefana Pramick is our representative for the Napa Library. So go ahead, Stefana.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here this evening. Each month, the Napa County Library, we're happy to be co-hosts with the Master Gardeners of Napa County. The Master Gardeners program and the library, they're both wonderful resources for your gardening needs. So I encourage you to come to the library and check out the materials that we have in our home and garden section. Tonight, I have one book to offer you. It is called Soil Science for Gardeners, Working with Nature to Build Soil Health, and it's by Robert Pavlis. And this is one of the books, one of the many books that we have in the collection about soil management in the garden setting. And it provides basic information about soil biology, and it provides practical and knowledgeable information to building a healthy soil. And it is based in science. And I know that is what the Master Gardeners, strive to bring us information that is based in science. So thank you for being here this evening, and I look forward to the program. Okay, Yvonne.
Thank you. All right. Well, as Stefana said, we're thrilled to have you here with us today. And this is such an important topic, and it's just really close to our hearts as gardeners, and I hope it's close to your heart as well. I am going to just do a little bit of introduction for those of you who have not been to our programs before. We are a statewide program that's actually based in each county in California, and there's actually Master Gardeners all over the United States as well. Here in the United States and in California, our mission really is to take research-based information out of the universities and give it out to the public, and that's what we're here to do. Our focus is on home horticulture, so we talk about home gardening, pest management, and the best and sustainable practices you can do in your own garden based on what we're finding out from the university. So that is our core mission, and our values is to get that information out to you and really keep you up to date on what the latest research is. And this is one of those great topics that has so much new research going on. We're thrilled to bring the new information to you. So I am now going to turn it over to our speakers tonight, and that is going to be Lori and Janice. So go ahead.
Good evening, and we're happy to be here with you. I'm Lori, and Janice and I will be going back and forth so you can hear us. We can kind of interchange with each other. Our goal is, as Yvonne mentioned, is to help establish Napa County as a place that values and implements regenerative agriculture practices, gardening practices. What we see happening in agriculture is also happening in our home gardens. So we need to change that. Tonight, we will share information about why soil around the world is in trouble and how the role of soil is critical in helping us mitigate the ongoing effects of climate change. We will provide practices that you can use to create healthy soil in your gardens, while at the same time pull down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into your soil, sequester it deep into that soil, and keep it there. Did you know there is a relationship between soil health and climate change? It is all interconnected. Climate change is a result of the negative impact we, primarily the industrialized countries, have had on the natural systems of the earth. Carbon dioxide can remain in our atmosphere for hundreds to thousands of years, while methane released from ruminants like cattle, sheep, goats, and buffalo only lasts about 12 years in the atmosphere. But the problem is methane from food and agricultural waste generates 80 times more potent warming in our environment, in our atmosphere over 20 years than even carbon does. We are seriously out of balance with nature, but there are things we can do to help reduce global warming. Scientists, engineers, and others are exploring and implementing approaches to address climate change, but there is one solution that is natural, it's inexpensive, and can be implemented immediately by all of us, and it is right under our feet. Researchers around the world are advocating a global switch to regenerative crop and pasture systems. It's been shown that regenerative agriculture creates healthier and more abundant crops. In addition, this practice can also pull down more carbon into the soil each year than the CO2 emissions that we give off. To see how this is possible, let's start with the overview of the ecosystems that help our planet function. Here's a global carbon cycle. We live in a closed environment. No additional carbon is created or depleted in our environment. It's where that carbon is stored that is so critical. The carbon naturally circulates from the atmosphere down into the oceans, the soil, the plants, trees, and back up again into the atmosphere. Burning fossil fuels and traditional farming methods of tilling and leaving bare soils exposed releases the carbon dioxide that is buried in the soil. And also the melting of permafrost and so forth in the oceans is also releasing carbon back into the atmosphere, which normally would be buried down there. On Earth, there's three major sinks. In other words, areas where carbon is stored. That's in the oceans, in the soils, and in plants, which draw all of that out of the atmosphere and pull it down into their systems. But carbon itself is not the enemy. How we work the soil as farmers and home gardeners can make a considerable difference to our climate change problem. And one of the quickest ways to do this is to regenerate our soil. So we're going to go back to high school for just a moment, and we're going to look at how plants work. I'm sure you all learned about photosynthesis. Just as a reminder, I'm going to do a quick summary. Plants pull three things out of the atmosphere. They pull carbon molecules, they pull the sunlight energy, and they pull water. Once those three things enter the plant, a chemical reaction happens, and it combines those things and turns them into glucose energy and oxygen gas molecules. So then the plant releases the oxygen back to us for all of us to breathe, and the glucoses and sugars half of them go down into the soil to feed the microorganisms that are all alive under our feet, and also into the roots of the plant to feed the plant itself. It's an incredible collaborative exchange that's happening underground, and we don't even see it or even think that it's there, but it is. Here's a quote from microbiologist Dr. David Johnson, and he says, "Soil is a living organism, and you have to feed this organism. That means you have to have crops growing continually, either a commodity crop or a cover crop. Crops shuttle the energy from the photosynthesis down to the soil system as sugars, proteins, and amino acids, which allow those living organisms to survive." So let's look at this forest. What do you notice about this? Look at all the leaves that have fallen and combined with the old leaf litter on the ground and other decaying materials. And it's a natural compost that's formed, and then it just filters down into the soil and increases the organic soil matter, which Janice is going to tell you more about. That is the critical part of the soil that feeds everything. The ground is covered by its own natural mulch here. There's a diversity of plants, trees, and shrubs, and the soil is not being disturbed by humans walking on it and compacting it. So these are the systems we need to put together that we act on in our own gardens. We need to work like nature has run for thousands of years, just as the forest does. A healthy natural system sequesters carbon and it regenerates the soil without human interference. So under the ground, let's take a look at what we have there. It is a soil food web. In just 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, there are billions of living organisms. Life soil is very complex. It comprises a vast community of microscopic bacteria, fungi, protozoa, good and some bad nematodes, as well as very visible things we're used to seeing, such as worms, earthworms, spiders, insects, other vertebrates like gophers and moles. Now, we need to look at the roots. The roots of a plant is this area around it is called the rhizosphere. And it's a narrow region of soil in which the chemistry and microbiology occurs to feed the plants and the soil. In just the past 25 years, we've learned that the majority of soil is built from the sugars that plants pump into the ground. As mentioned in the photosynthesis process, these sugars, along with amino and organic acids, feed the soil microorganisms, and in return, those organisms provide nutrients from the soil back into the plant. It's a dynamic, interdependent system. So now I'm going to turn this over to Janice, and she's going to tell you about what's in our soil. Janice?
So increasing soil organic matter is the first of the tips that we're going to talk about for a healthy soil and climate. And soil is made up of 4 essential components, as you can see on the circle on the left. There's 2 parts that are porous, 25% air and 25% water. The 2 solid parts are 45% minerals, which is made up of sand, silt, and clay, and 5% soil organic matter. So why is that air portion important? It helps roots penetrate and provides passages for water movement and water retention in the soil. The space is needed for oxygen to feed soil organisms, which exchange nutrients with the plants, because without air, roots and organisms die. We all know that all living things need water, and that includes plants and the microorganisms. The combination of minerals form the backbone of the soil. The ideal we call loam, which is with the addition of the organic matter, is ideal for growing plants. It allows proper water retention, porosity for air, and space for the plant roots to grow. It's roughly equal parts sand, silt, and clay. So what about that soil organic matter that we see on the pie chart on the right? This makes up just 5% or less of the soil, and it's made up of plant and animal material. Soil organic matter is a living biomass of microbes, fresh and partially decomposed organic matter, and humus. It supplies nutrients and food for organisms and microbial diversity, which in turn feed our plants. It's where the magic really happens. Most commercial land, agricultural land, has only about 1% of organic matter. But farmers who are using regenerative practices find they're able to build the organic matter in their soil up to 4 or 5% or even more. So adding compost to your gardens helps build soil organic matter. And if you really get hooked, you can make your own. On the left are examples of ingredients that will turn into the rich organic compost you see on the right. Food waste, garden trimmings, and brown dried material can all go into your own compost pile. But put weeds with seeds, diseased plants, and proteins like meat into your yard waste bin where it is safely processed. And you can buy that compost from our local recycling companies. You can also rake fallen leaves into your garden bed. They will help form compost naturally and will keep the ground covered without you spending a dime. Let the organic matter in your soil attract and nurture the soil organisms and do much of the work for you. Even one application of compost persists in the soil to increase carbon sequestration levels. If you want to learn more about composting, Master Gardeners offer several workshops multiple times during the year. So you can check that out, those dates out on our website. Or come to our open house at Las Flores Learning Garden, June 26th, and visit the compost booth. So here's another way we can keep the soil covered. Planting cover crops, which also are called green mulch or green manure, in our own gardens in between our seasonal vegetables. Here's why we're discussing the importance of keeping the ground covered using crops. They improve soil texture, attract soil organisms, add soil organic matter, retain moisture in the ground, and help keep it cool. Keep the organisms in the soil fed, happy, and abundant. And it inhibits weed growth, which is a good thing. And it also prevents leaching of the soil minerals. It's a great way to build the fertility of the soil while adding biomass both above and below the ground. And you'll find it improves your garden's yield. So here you can see a variety of cover crops that also address a variety of soil issues. The legumes, including clover, vetch, and fava beans, help fix nitrogen in the soil for the next crop that you plant. Daikon radishes can drill into hard compacted soil and help that aeration so the air can get in. Mustard and other brassicas like broccoli and kale can inhibit nematodes in the soil, wherein grasses have a netted root system that helps hold the soil in place. All of them attract and feed soil organisms, prevent weed growth, pull water into the soil, attract pollinators, increase crop yields, and keep the soil cool. One of the most common methods in commercial agricultural farming is leaving the soil bare or fallow between crops. But think about it. Where in nature does that happen? Remember that forest that Lori showed you. Every time we leave the soil bare, we are losing the opportunity to pull carbon into the soil via photosynthesis, and thus cutting off the food supply or sugars that feed the organisms and keep the soil functioning. Plus, when the soil is naked, it's susceptible to major weather, water, and wind erosion. This is a Napa Master Gardener's vegetable garden. The tall plants that you see on the left are fava beans, a cover crop that puts nitrogen back into the soil. She planted these after her summer vegetables were complete. When your summer vegetables are finished, it's time to plant a fall cover crop. Planting in the fall will allow the seeds to germinate and start growing before the cold weather sets in. Then you can plant another cover crop after your winter vegetables are finished, which is around February in Napa. This second cover crop will replenish the soil again, and this timing allows it to grow before cutting it down to plant your summer garden in late April or early May. When cover crops begin to flower, that's when you cut them down just at or below the soil level, leaving the roots in the ground to decompose. Next, you chop up the plant material into small pieces, leaving it on the soil as green manure, then cover it with an organic mulch. But in our landscapes between existing shrubs and trees, we may not want to have other plants, but we can still cover the soil and feed it with mulch that is over compost. Mulch is simply a layer of material, commonly organic, covering the soil surface to exclude sunlight. It reduces water requirements, cools the soil, prevents soil compaction, reduces erosion, and suppresses weeds. We're learning as gardeners that there are many ways to keep our ground covered and the importance of doing so. Add a thick layer of seedless straw to your vegetable beds. A combination of compost topped with mulch on our landscapes, and leaving those leaves under our trees and in our landscape all help to build that top organic layer of soil. So keep all these benefits in mind and work to keep your soil covered. We pay attention to what's above the ground. It's what we see. But there is that vast, secret, and magical world under the ground that runs the whole show that Lori talked about earlier. Maximizing living roots means keeping plants growing in the ground as much of the time as possible. Every time we leave the soil bare, we're losing the opportunity to pull carbon into the soil via photosynthesis, and thus cutting off that food supply, the sugars, from the plant roots that feed the soil organisms. They keep that soil system functioning, and the roots of the plants are the delivery system. Living roots in the soil also build soil structure and anchor the soil in place. Naked, unstructured soil without living roots is vulnerable to wind and rain erosion. So this garden is covered with plants. Think about what the root system must look like and the effect that they are having on the garden soil. When we grow lots of trees and perennial plants, imagine how much carbon we bring down into the soil through photosynthesis, feeding the soil community below and keeping the soil vibrantly alive and working. It's like a factory of billions of soil organisms working on our behalf, and we may be completely unaware of it. But we can't afford to be oblivious to this phenomenon any longer. It can be our lifeline to the future. So now we're going to go back to Lori to learn about our next tip, plant diversity.
And this is what we want to do. We want to increase it. Think about your yards and gardens. Do you have lots of different types of plants growing? Take your cues from nature. Here's a photo of the Napa River, and you can see a variety of plants which are ideal for our local environment, our climate. Diversity above the ground also means diversity below the ground. Soil organisms thrive where there is an abundance of different kinds of roots. They draw good nutrients, so your plants will be healthy. Here's a Napa garden that mimics our natural habitat with an excellent variety of plants above the ground and, again, the roots below the ground. This garden attracts a variety of soil organisms to the root systems, and with so much photosynthesis going on here, lots of carbon is being drawn down from the atmosphere and sequestered into the soil. And think of all the happy pollinators that are living here. Now, this garden is full of perennials, and perennials keep their roots in the ground year after year, creating a vital soil food web and preventing erosion. If you plant flowers or vegetables that are annuals, don't pull them out by their roots when they're done. Just like Janice mentioned earlier, you just cut them off at ground level, and you're leaving those roots in that soil to decay and provide good nutrients in that down there for all those living beings. Now, in this vegetable garden, which is planted annually, one thing to do is to rotate your plant families about every 3 years. If we don't, pathogens in the soil and pests above the ground, particularly drawn to that plant family, can become a problem. By diversifying what we grow and where we grow it, we outsmart the pest community by changing what we're offering them. On the bottom right picture here, it's a really good view of what interplanting looks like. It's where a variety of different crops and here flowers are being, every other row is something different. And again, this provides tremendous diversity in this vegetable garden. And it also keeps weeds out because it's so well covered. The weeds can't germinate there. It enhances the soil fertility, and it promotes cooperation among different species to enhance the health of all. And it helps with pest control. And just as Janice mentioned earlier, planting cover crops between growing seasons also brings diversity to that garden bed. Our next practice we want to tell you about is minimizing soil disturbance. We humans are dependent upon a very thin layer of topsoil covering our Earth's surface to grow our food. It is where the life of the soil resides and determines our existence on this planet. So healthy topsoil is full of worms, bacteria, fungi, and roots, and it stays in place. But as you can see here on the picture on the left, soil that has been plowed for years becomes powder. It's dead. There is no life left in it. But look at the right. It's rich and green because that farmer kept cover crops going in between his regular crop cycle. So let's take a look at this apartment building on the left here. And this actually exists in Europe. And what it represents is exactly what we've talked about soil structure. It is a community of living spaces, hallways, open air circulation, and pipes carrying power and water. This building is a perfect representation of what's happening underground. Just like Janice's pie chart showed, it's a well-structured soil with half the volume is made up of pore space so that the water and air can penetrate and circulate. But on the other hand, look at the picture on the right. It's a totally demolished building that's collapsed. All of the hallways and spaces are compressed and the airflow is restricted. There is no space for life to enter and move around. And this is what's happening to the soil of the world. It is now in this demolished pile of rubble state. The particles of the sand, silt, and clay are compressed, and the soil structures are destroyed. So our soil management practices that we're sharing with you tonight can affect, increase, and maintain those soil structures that are so important. Right now, I want to share a video with you by a regenerative farming soil champion, Ray Archuleta, and he shows you a great example of this. So give me one moment.
I have a question to ask you. Is your soil healthy, functioning, and stable? One of the best diagnostic tools that I know of is the soil stability test. Here are two soils, exactly the same soil type. This soil has been tilled for 30 years. It is addicted to chemicals and fertilizer. This soil has not been tilled for 40 years. It is covered year-round with diverse plants. It is completely weaned from chemicals and fertilizer. Watch what happens when we drop the soil in the water. Notice how the conventional till soil is falling apart. The biotic glues in the organic matter are burned up by tillage. The soil pores have collapsed. Notice the no-till soil. The soil's holding together. The pore spaces are still intact. Do this test for yourself. I guarantee if you dig a little, you'll learn a lot.
So as Ray showed us, the healthy soil stayed together because it's aggregated, while the tilled soil fell apart and dissolved in the water. This occurs when those soil organisms, the glue that holds those minerals, plant roots, and living and dead organisms together are broken up. But if they're aggregates, if we leave them in this kind of chunky form, they resist breaking down from external forces like wind and rain. Aggregates make our soil stable and help prevent loss of topsoil while also minimizing runoff and erosion. Now it is estimated that we are losing about 1% of our topsoil every year to erosion, and that's 10 times faster than it takes to replace that topsoil. So, no-till, okay? Get rid of that rototiller. You don't need it. You want to keep those aggregates, as shown in this little picture on the left. You want to keep those together in your soil. And you don't want to double dig or rototill, as mentioned, because even though those were always considered the hallmark of dedicated home gardeners, just as plowing and harrowing fields were for the farmers, it's not a good practice, right? Imagine what those rototiller blades are doing to that soil. They're slashing through those aggregates. They're flattening the soil structure. They're making it difficult for the normal processes of life to continue. It requires a rebuilding of soil aggregate and microbial infrastructure each time the soil is disturbed. So let's think back to that apartment building that was demolished. If that happened every single spring, and we left our soil undisturbed and let our soil community rebuild year after year after year, it's like, you don't want to rebuild that apartment building every year, right? So let's not have to rebuild our soil every year. So instead of using your rototiller, turn it into some fun garden art. So now Janice will talk to you about wise water use. Janice.
So as we know, with climate change, our water supplies are an extreme concern for all of us. Water will become even more important as the world's population increases and if droughts continue, hopefully not. Many of the water-saving methods in this section are not difficult to install. In this garden that we see here, irrigation is laid out in a grid to keep the soil evenly moist. And notice the straw mulch keeping the ground covered. Did you know that drip irrigation can be run whenever we need to, even when there are water restrictions? So we also want to plant in hydrozones, and that means that plants with similar water needs are grouped together so they're on the same irrigation zone or station. And don't forget that mature root systems extend beyond the plant's base. So you need to move drip irrigation and emitters out as the tree canopy grows and keep it about at the edge of the canopy. Also, covered soil with an abundant amount of organic matter will actually retain water and stay cooler. And the soil organisms need a little moisture. They go dormant in dry, hot soil. This is a photo of a fairly simple water catchment system, collecting rainwater from the roof in rain barrels. Did you realize that 1 inch of rain collected from a 1,000 square foot roof will prevent 600 gallons from becoming surface runoff, and also means that it's not going onto your garden? But there are also other options. Water from a roof drain can also be directed right directly to your garden. Swales like this provide a place for water to gather and slowly permeate, returning it to the soil rather than running down the street. Think about whatever you're paying for water, it's just money going down the drain. So living soils actually create more storage capacity than even just a barrel. So we don't want to waste it. Using the right plants for our local environment means we save money. Many native plants suited to a dry summer ecosystem, like those pictured here, don't require much water during the summer and receive their water fix in the winter when we usually, hopefully, get rain. However, you don't want to completely stop watering existing established plants, but we can cut back and try to refrain from planting new trees and perennials, hard as it might be. So synthetic fertilizer is not how nature evolved for plants to take in nutrients. The natural systems that build both healthy plants and the healthy soil biome are short-circuited when we give synthetics. Giving those synthetic nitrogen and fertilizers to your plants is like giving candy to a child. The more they get, the more they want. And we know that's not healthy. So here's a bit of history about the development of chemical fertilizers. After World War II, scientists discovered that they could use the excess nitrogen from munitions factories for fertilizer. Soon it was being widely used by farmers all over the world. Homeowners and gardeners began buying this quote unquote miracle for their home gardens in the 50s and 60s. Global fertilization rose above 200 million tons in 2018. And harvest became abundant for a while. However, the soil was being depleted of its soil organism community and its carbon organic matter. Think about that bare, dry soil that Lori showed you. Natural photosynthesis, with that symbiotic relationship between the soil organisms and the plant's roots, what became disturbed and disrupted, broken. And research has also shown that food grown in soil with a depleted and broken soil microbiome impacts our overall health, human gut health. Using synthetic fertilizer not only adds greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, but the production and its transport around the world also contributes to climate change. The natural approaches using compost and organic fertilizers that we've been talking about are not only better for the climate, but also for our gardens and for our own bodies. Well, this doesn't look good. If you have a problem, we recommend trying to avoid using pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. Master gardeners use a system called IPM, that's Integrated Pest Management. This is a graduated process of addressing pests and diseases that begin with the least invasive first. We only advise chemicals as a very last resort. When you have a pest problem or suspect plant disease, call or email your local master gardeners with your problem. We'll work to find the safest solution. So speaking of healthy plants, here are photos of roots from a borage plant experiment completed by one of our soil team members. As the control method, all 4 plants were grown in grow bags with the same type of soil. In number 1, we see plant roots with no fertilizer or amendments at all, just au naturel. Looking at the plant growth, the soil appears to have a very active soil biome. Number 2 may surprise you. It shows the root system from a plant using a synthetic chemical fertilizer. It has the smallest volume of root biomass, and it does not appear healthy. 2 types of organic fertilizers were applied to bag number 3, a compost tea and a seaweed powder with other natural elements. It looks like it did well, and that's why, and it obviously has a healthy root system. Plant number 4 had just compost added. The biomass of the root system is the richest in volume, and the coloring appears the healthiest. Just another reason why we master gardeners are so high on compost. And this reinforces a multi-decade field experiment done by the Rodale Institute comparing soil carbon sequestration and fertilization. Organic fertilization significantly improved the capacity of soil organic carbon storage in comparison to chemical fertilization. So keep in mind, as we think about energy, that we want to reduce fossil fuel use. So use electric or battery powered equipment instead of gas. And of course, hand tools are even better and healthier for the gardener too. So even better, take a seat on your garden lounge chair or hammock and enjoy your garden for an afternoon. Watch the wildlife in this life supportive space that you created. A little wild, a lot natural, and maybe some areas even untended this season. A little mess can be a good thing. So now, Lori, I think it's time to wrap it up.
So here is a list of the practices we talked about tonight. You probably noticed that Janice and I did share some overlapping and repeating information on soil practices, but the more you hear it, hopefully the more it sank in, and it will all help us enrich our soil because every bit of it is interconnected. So the first tip we gave you was to increase your soil organic matter. How do you do that? You put compost on it, not chemicals. You maximize your living roots by not pulling things out, but letting those roots stay in there to decay and feed the soil and the microorganisms. And it helps feed all that wonderful plant above ground. You don't want to minimize your soil. You want to minimize your soil disturbance. Definitely. Don't be digging in there or rototilling, etc. Just dig a hole where you want to put a plant. Leave the rest alone. You want to keep your soil covered. All those great cover crops of diversity of plants, very important. And of course, as I mentioned, plant diversity. Can't get enough of it. And practice careful, wise water use. And please reduce your energy, because if we do all of that, we're going to help our earth sequester carbon, and you're going to do it right in your own gardens. We can each make a big difference with this. So we hope you've been moved to action to try going natural in the way you treat your soil, and help sequester carbon to reduce climate change. So now I think we're ready for your questions. Yvonne, did we get any questions in our chat tonight?
So I forgot to mention at the beginning when we started to type questions into the chat, but we do have some questions popping up. So for anybody that's here, please do type in any questions you have and we will answer your questions as we go along. So I see a couple of questions. The first one is, I have a 15 by 20 space that has only grown weeds for the last few years, and I want to start growing something new in it besides weeds. It's naturally clay soil. Given the presentation, what should I try to grow? Daikon radish or something else to break up the soil? Or should they do sheet mulching? Could you provide a recommendation?
Yeah. I would like to address that because I have done sheet mulching in my own yard where I had tons of weeds growing and it worked beautifully. You definitely want to do sheet mulching. Well, first you want to cut your weeds very short. Cut that area as short as you can. Then you want to do your sheet mulching. So you're going to water it. You're going to lay down newspaper and cardboard. Because did you know all those organisms under there, they love that stuff. The worms are going to come up and eat it and it's good food, okay? Then you're going to keep that watered. You're going to put on compost on top of that. So it's rebuilding the wonderful nutrients in the soil once they all filter down in. And then you're going to cover it with mulch or some type of cover that keeps all weed seeds. It will kill weed seeds and it will keep more from coming in. And you're going to let that sit until, probably 2 months, maybe 3 months. And it's great to do when it's hot and sunny because it's going to help all that cardboard and everything break down faster, and it's going to kill the weed seeds faster. And then when you take all that up, when it's done, you're going to have several inches of wonderful, rich soil. And I would suggest then maybe put a little bit more compost on it and start planting. Now, if you don't want to wait that long for everything to happen, once you have sheet mulch it, you can cut little small holes in that and put your plants right into those areas. But you do run the risk, though, of sun getting in there and letting some of that weed seed come back. So if you can be patient, I would just wait a couple months before you take all that up and then start planting in there. Anybody else want to add to that?
So Lori, I just want to say, you don't take it back up. So you can plant into it once it breaks down a little, but you don't really go back and take it up.
Well, I guess I should have clarified.
Yeah.
In mine, I put a plastic sheeting over it, which made it really hot and helped kill the weed seed. I took off the plastic sheeting. Okay. I was thinking that way. But if you don't use plastic sheeting, which you don't have to, you can just use real good thick mulch and then plant right in it.
Yeah, you don't need to cover with anything other than the mulch. Sometimes people put a little bit of compost and then the mulch on top, and that helps kind of speed things up, but you can plant right into it too. Somebody was asking about whether or not the video will be posted of this presentation. I know you're going to address that in a moment.
Well, Yvonne, you did record it tonight, right?
Yep, it's recording right now. Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. Yes.
So I was also going to add that we talked about minimizing disturbing the soil, and that definitely you want to do that because it helps the structure of the soil develop and stay there. But the other thing is weed seeds need sun to germinate and grow. So if you dig up your soil, you're bringing weed seeds back up to the top where they can grow. If you don't disturb it, they just stay down there and they never turn into little weed plants. And so that's another benefit for not disturbing the soil, is it will cut down on the weeds just because they won't germinate.
Right. That's right.
Very, very good point. Yes, I had a friend that rototilled his vegetable garden a few years ago, and he had hundreds of tomatillos come up after that because he brought all those wonderful seeds up to the top and they all germinated. So
yes, yes. So we did record this session tonight. Yvonne did record it, and it will be posted on our website. But let's finish questions first, and then I'll show you how to access that to watch it again. Are there any other questions?
The only other question was, or comment was, Dana said she had the same problem/question, and she really appreciates Tammy asking and for the great answers. So same idea, take an area that was weedy and how to rehabilitate that to make a garden area.
Yeah, and if you can cut the weeds down before they go to seed and then take that material and put it in your yard waste, then you'll have less weed seeds as well.
Yeah, it's getting a little late for most of my weeds are going to seed right now too. So you're right. If you used a mower, you might mow and use a catcher and catch the weed seeds and then put them into the city waste recycle, or the green waste. Sorry, green waste.
Yeah. The city recycling system is amazing. We've toured it and recommend that to anybody that wants to know how they're creating compost and dealing with our waste. It is amazing. They're creating very rich compost because they can get a lot hotter to kill that weed seed than you can in your own home composting situation. So that's why we, like Janice mentioned, put that stuff in the yard waste bins, and they will take care of that and turn it into something good. So
the same with anything that has diseases. If you're trimming or pulling off like rose leaves right now that have black spot, you want to put those in your compost also, in the city compost, because it will they again will kill that better than we can at home. We have another question. Olivia asked a question here about the Rodell research study that you mentioned. Do you have a resource for that? Is that on your resource list?
Yes, it is. And we're going to share the references that we used to create this talk at the end, and they all have links, so you can go and investigate it more. But do look up Rodale, R-O-D-A-L-E, Rodale Institute on you could Google it or something. They're fascinating. They're doing all kinds of wonderful research. They have soil trials and things that they're doing, and they're learning so much and sharing it. And this is happening all over the country now. There's institutes all over, the universities are doing this. UC Davis is doing it. Everyone is looking at how soils can be enriched, be healthier, and change the way that agriculture and home gardeners are using, and planting and using their soil. And all the benefit is to reduce global warming, to pull that carbon down out of the atmosphere.
And I want to mention that a lot of the photos that we used today were from the organization Kiss the Ground, which has a great training program too. If you really want to learn more about soil and really get into that topic, they have a wonderful classes and courses on soil.
And watch their movie called Kiss the Ground on Netflix. It's very interesting, and it's also very hopeful about our future. Right. And I understand they have a second movie coming out soon. So good information there.
So we have another question about crop rotation. Tammy's asking about a 3-year crop rotation for planting a particular crop, and she's asking about tomatoes. She said she planted tomatoes in 2017, and then she did not plant them in 18, 19, or 2020. So can she plant it this year?
Mm-hmm.
It's been 3 years.
Yes. Janice, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, I would say yes. You could plant them in the same place again. But, and I know, if you have a small garden, you think, well, I don't have space to rotate everything 3 times, but there's information on our Master Gardener website about crop rotation, but there are families like tomatoes and peppers are in one family, things like broccoli and kale are another family, lettuces are another family. So you can move, if you can, create like spaces that you would change where you plant everything every year. But even if you can't, if you don't have enough space to really do that, if you just alternate different crops or grow something different for a winter crop, there are lots of things that we can grow here in Napa Valley and plant in the late summer, early fall, and have a harvest in the winter time. And then, that's a different family than the tomatoes. And so you can just do a 2-year rotation if that's all you have the space for, but you just want to try to do something different, or intercrop like Lori had talked about, plant something in between your tomatoes, like, maybe lettuce that you can use the tomato as a little bit of shade. There's a lot of information about how to rotate crops and interplant. And they talk about that. We have a monthly food growing forum on Sundays that Lori will give the specifics, but they talk about, kind of what you should be doing this month and things like crop rotation and families and whatnot.
Yeah. And one of the things about intercropping is when you've got multiple crops, you're making a more diverse system, which has a more natural system, and it's going to be less of a problem for rotating because you're not planting only one monocrop where the pests can build up. So if you're intercropping, that actually helps, and you can reduce your rotation time. Or if you do cover crops, also keeping something in the soil that, think of a particular pest or problem that likes only a specific crop. If you plant different crops all the time, it will have less food and it will probably not be as happy. And so that will keep it a little bit more under control too. Mm-hmm. We do have some handouts. We have a Healthy Garden handout on our website that talks about crop rotation and families, and it's quite helpful, I think, if you review that handout.
Yeah, great.
Let's see, we had another, let's see, thank you for the resources. Somebody was asking about the city composting. Do you feel comfortable using it since it is not, and she put in quotes, organic, although it is actually certified organic, I believe.
It is, and the way they're processing it, they're killing anything that's bad stuff that might get in there. So, and I think it's really improved over the years too. They've gotten better and better at it. So I would feel comfortable using that. Yes, but it's up to you. You know, you can also buy compost or make your own. Looking at the time, I think we've only got a few minutes left.
Yep, we're done with the questions, so we might want to go into the resources.
Okay, so here we are. This is a list of the resources, and all of these are actual live links that you can get on our website. And how do you get there? Here, you go to the UC Master Gardener homepage, napamg.ucanr.edu, and you will see this bar across the top, and you go click on Events, Find Us. And the page shown on the bottom here will drop down, go to References and Slides, Workshops and Events. And in a few days, or at least within a week or so, you will see this recording pop up at the top because they show it in reverse order. You know, the most recent one will be at the top, and it will say, you know, Soil is the Solution, Library Talk, May 5th. That's actually going to be under the Library Talk section on that page. And you'll also see lots of other wonderful videos there from all of our workshops in the last couple of years. So you'll find things on composting and some of the other things that we mentioned tonight. So that's there. And there's also a couple of pages that you can print out from there, which is some of the tips. It will be the 8 healthy tips that we just shared tonight. And there's another resource list there. Now here, you will be receiving an email, by email, a survey, and we would love to have you fill that out. You'll probably get this in a few weeks, and we'd like to hear from you about what you thought about the presentation. Do you have any suggestions, any comments about it? We always want to improve. We want to hear from our listeners, and so please do fill that out and send it back to us. And I also want to tell you about some great upcoming workshops. This Sunday from 3 to 4 is the Growing Squash Food Forum. Our food forum is the second Sunday of every month, and there's some great topics there. From, like Janice mentioned, there's growing winter vegetables or growing summer vegetables or different things, like here the squash one. So that's from 3 to 4 Sunday. Register on our homepage. And then to the right is a poster of our next library talk on Thursday, June 2nd from 7 to 8, all about salvias and California native plants. And they are doing great now. I've got lots of salvias in my yard. They're in full bloom. It's beautiful. So if you don't have any yet or need other native plants to reduce your watering needs, please listen to that library talk on June 2nd. And one more thing I want to tell you about. Our grand opening. Janice mentioned this. The Lost Forest Learning Garden, which is at the Lost Forest Community Center up on Linda Vista, we're in a cooperative relationship here with our city of Napa, and we are planting learning gardens there. And on June 26th, we're going to have a grand opening from 11 to 2, and it's great for the whole family. There's going to be 25 learning, or I should say educational stations around the property. It'll include master gardener stations as well as community organizations such as the Audubon or the Native Plant Society and so forth. And Napa Climate Now will be there. But we will be showing demonstrations. We're going to have activities for your children. So please bring them and learn all about the wonderful work we're doing there at Las Flores Learning Garden. We hope to see you there. And that concludes our program tonight. So thank you very, very much for joining us, and good evening.